Alright, you guys, we have successfully removed the factory engine and fuel pump harness. We no longer need this anymore because we're not using none of that anymore. As you can see, the car is a mess. Yes, it is, I know. Cleaning it up right now. Getting this factory harness out is a big step. As you can see, this is some of the stuff that we removed from the vehicle. I actually came up with a great idea about mounting a couple other items off camera. So one of the things that I came up with is that the reason why I have all this kind of stuff sitting there is I'm kind of just supporting the seat kind of until I make seat rails, which I'm going to end up probably doing that in today's video or possibly tomorrow's video, and getting that all done. Here's the factory seat belts. No longer using those, so those can come out. Basically anything factory we kind of took out of the car. We are going to make some aluminum door skins that will cover the door perfectly. It'll be flat panel door skins, and the seat belt or the door handle deal will still work, and the electronic locks should still work too. I'm debating on keeping the power window switches on this side or making some custom switches. I know where the pins are that come through the side of the inside of the firewall, so if I cut the pins back here, I could actually take over the internal functions and make my own switches for windows, like say for instance right here or right here, right here if I wanted to. Or I could even make another switch panel that would sit right above this, and that would actually mount it and house it also. I like the idea of using the stock shifter in the car. I think it looks really cool how it looks and it all comes together. I need to come up with a mounting provision for this, and then decide if I want to go ahead and utilize something for the stock provisions or not. So on to the next part. So next thing we need to do is get this Haltech harness kind of put back where it needs to go. Most of this harness actually goes inside of the engine bay, so I think for now, to kind of clean up the car, I'm just going to kind of tuck it right here out of the way. This is the fuse box for the Haltech. Basically it controls all the main engine functions. I can add in another switch panel if I would like. Like I said, this is your stock airbag function right there. We don't have an airbag in here. This is actually hollow now, so I like that. I was actually thinking about mounting the yaw sensor up there, but from all the research that I've done, you want to mount the yaw sensor in the middle of the car. It doesn't have to be as far forward as possible or as far rear as possible, but all the other guys that I've seen that mounted it, they mounted it either in the middle of the car where about the driver sits, or somewhere from there forward towards the firewall. I've never seen anybody mount it forward of the firewall, so we're going to go ahead and get some mounting done for that. This is the stock body harness. We are not going to be using pretty much none of it. I'm debating on literally taking out all the stock wiring to the car, and the only wiring that'll be left in the car will be just the Haltech pretty much. I'm highly debating it, but it's coming to a point to where I think that that's actually what we're going to end up probably doing, because I can make my own switches for window switches and door locks. I can power up and wire those all myself. I don't need the stock wiring to do that. So for now, we're not going to worry about that. We're going to go ahead and just get as much of this other nonsense done as we can. We need to make a battery mount for the battery. I made another tray that sits outside, and I think what we're going to do is I have some angle iron, we're going to go ahead and make some 45s and make a battery mount. So the battery is going to sit inside of the car. I was going to put the battery in the trunk, but with putting the battery inside the car, if I make a sealed aluminum box, and I have some aluminum that I could bend up and make an aluminum box, and if we put the battery in the trunk, I'll show you guys this. So this is pretty cool. So if we put the battery in the trunk, I think it'll throw our bias off for Okay, so these are the two bins that I made. Basically, it is some 1-inch 120 wall Dom tubing, and I basically took two grade 8 washers and I TIG welded them. My TIG welds aren't too bad. TIG welded them around the side, and then took them and put them on the belt sander and grinded them down, and they fit perfectly in these little slots right here. So now what we need to do is, now that we kind of got an idea of what we want to do, I think I'm just going to go ahead and rock with that idea. The great thing about fabrication is if you ever want to change something in the future, you can always go back and change it in the future, and it won't really, like, I don't know, it doesn't bother me none, because I mean there's always ways to get better. So if I have this mounted right here, as you can see, if I go and put pressure on that point over there and push that up, this should push pressure down onto the coilover, and that's essentially what we're looking for. I am going to probably want to put some more tack welds. I'll probably end up welding this up. I'm still out of argon. The argon, the Praxair place was closed this past weekend, and I just haven't had time to get out there. I am still considering about taking this cross brace bar out, but for now it's using it as a support bar. As I was stating earlier, it's going to be a little bit harder for me to mount my, or make the firewall for the front to rear cabin with the X bar in there. If I take the X bar out, I could actually just notch out a plate that would go here, and then it would lay flat and then go up underneath there, and then it would be perfect. I'm still going to figure out how to do that, so I haven't gave up on the situation yet. So for now, like I said, I got that piece, so what we're going to go ahead and do is pull that out. Going to go ahead and take our tube sleeves and go ahead and put them inside our coilovers. So go ahead and put that in there, put a bolt in there, and then that goes all the way through. Then you just put a nut on the other side, like so. Now, with having two different coilovers, coilover brands, I guess there is some advantages and disadvantages, I would say. I guess the disadvantage for me is that with having them with two different brands, they're two completely different designs and two completely different coilovers, versus I like the design of the BCs with them using like a steel body lower. I really do like that. That's really cool. And it's all TIG welded together, and it's very sturdy. But I also like the lightweight strength of these aluminum lowers also that come on the BCs, or on the Fortunatos. And Fortunato's design is really nice also. A lot of people have this problem with the ears always cracking, and so that's what the only downfall to the Fortunatos. But this was from me having really solid sway bar end link mounts, because I came up with my own sway bar end link mounts, and I push the car to its absolute limit all the time. That's what it's all about. So we're gonna go ahead and tighten those down. It looks like there was like a booger put on here. I don't know if that was done intentionally or not, but it looks like it's like a lowering booger that they put on there. And it looks like they added a couple more there too. So they added a couple tack welds, so you couldn't go any lower on these shock bodies. And so I really don't like that, but that's how I got them. These were not new. These were from somebody I know. And so they tracked the car a lot, so they didn't want the suspension to adjust a lot on them. So this is the way that they had it set up. It does work pretty good, but like I said, for what we're trying to do, I'm actually going to be changing up a few things. So yes, so moving forward. So now that we see that we got 2 points like that, now it's the next decision to figure out if we want to use round tube or square tube to make the points of interest that will basically be notches. There'll be like 2 round notches, one there and one there, and that'll get TIG welded all together, and then that'll be our holding point that would go onto this, and it would hold here. Now, I like the idea about using the thicker wall, the thicker 120 wall, 1.5 inch tubing with the 1 inch dom wall sleeves. I really do like that idea. So I think I might utilize that idea, but then I might not utilize it. Because if I do it with 1 inch tube, let me get a piece of 1 inch tube so you guys can kind of see what that looks like. Alright, so here's a piece of 1 inch tube. This is just some thin tube that I had just for representation purposes. This is electro welded. This isn't dom wall. So this is just electro weld. And basically just this has been my mock-up piece to help me get all my angles right and all that. And it actually is kind of cool because you can kind of see how the X-brace is going to turn out. So looks like I'll have to basically make the X-brace go somewhat like this, and it'll go from that point there to the middle. It'll get welded to here, and then the X-brace will also continue on to that other side. So it'll be something like this, and those 2 points will meet up in the middle. What that'll do is it'll make this whole this whole back piece really strong and very structurally sound. I don't want this breaking. I do plan on pushing this system pretty hard. No, this is not a setup for somebody that I would sell it to them. This is strictly for me and strictly for something that I wanted to do to get my carcane habit out. And if you're a true car guy, you understand what that meant. So we got electro welded tubing, and if we notch it out, it looks like we would have enough space on both sides if we did 1 inch. And then what we could do is make some 1 inch kickers that would basically almost line up with this point. And the reason I use this long tube is this is a perfect cheater tube to see where stuff is going to line up, how it's going to line up, you know, and all that. So if I were to notch out, fish mouth out this piece right here, weld it to the side right here, then I have 2 more notches there and there. I could actually weld those other 2 notches to there. And then I would have a 3-point notch, and that should be pretty strong. And then what I'll be able to do is take, because it's a tube that actually sits off, I'll be able to make bracing that'll go from here to there, and then I could also make bracing that'll go from there to there. Now, what I'm going to do on that side is, because there's no small kicker that goes down there yet, what I might end up doing is going ahead and fabbing out the other side of the X-brace, so that way they'll roughly have almost the same amount of height difference on each side to go up, and as far as mounting those. So that's where I'm at for now. Like I had told you guys in a previous video, what I want to do to make these really strong for the fulcrum points is I am going to go ahead and finish stitch welding this in. What I should have did is coat this tube a little bit more, so that way it wouldn't be just it wouldn't just be weld all the way across. And then the great thing is it's only tacked, so if I unbolt this, I can actually notch out this tube right here, and then it'll sit down a little bit lower. And then from there, what I'll do is make it to where it's coped, and then I'll be able to TIG weld this all the way around, and then that'll be really strong. And then I'll actually put the dom tube sleeve still back over it, and then I will make a longer sleeve that'll go from here all the way down to here, and that will be TIG welded on here also. So that way I can use the up and down lateral movement.
like I intended to. So we're going to go ahead and cut up some 120 wall 1-inch Dom tube so we can go ahead and get this all coped out and get it all set up for our setup. See you guys in a minute.
Alright guys, so back to the project. So right now, basically, I went ahead and tried to just grab all the big stuff out of the car that we're not going to be using anymore. Basically, I want to go ahead, and even though this stuff is still sitting back here, this sits flat, so I want to put my plate back here with my electronic power steering pump and all that stuff, so I can start kind of getting measurements where to go on the sides. This right here is our Elite 2500 wiring diagram, so it kind of shows us everything that we can do for as far as wiring up what devices with this ECU. You can do literally anything you possibly want, and then there's so many extra outputs that it has on here that basically I can make whatever I want, and then like my spare injector outputs can be used as generic digital pulsed outputs. So I can use injector 5, 6, 7, and 8 if I want to as digital pulsed outputs, and then I can also use, because I'm using just 4 ignition coils, I can use the other 5 and 6 ignition coils, and then there's 8 ignition drivers, but 5 and 6, and then it says, let's see if we flip over to the other side, you got 7 and 8, these go to ignition drivers, but you can also use these as generic digital pulsed outputs also. So basically that means I can run all the stuff like the electronic power steering, alright, we got the panel kind of mocked up in the car, how we're going to have it. So essentially, I kind of want to leave the carpet in the car. I really do like the carpet. The carpet's pretty nice. And it kind of keeps that kind of like racing / kind of factory look to it. So it's like business in the front and business in the back of the car, but in the inside it's still kind of a comforty feeling kind of type. So what I like is that the bracing that I made for the electronic power steering pump, I basically used the factory mounting bracket that it had versus using the other pump that I took the whole bracket off. This was going to be a lot harder to make a bracket system for versus using the actual bracket setup that actually came on the car originally. So I went ahead and utilized that setup, and then it still has the reservoir here, so you can still fill up the reservoir setup. So that's pretty neat. What I like is that now that that's all in there, I can go ahead and wire that up to the Haltech. That'll be based off of the steering angle sensor, which I'll actually have to put back in this car, which a lot of people don't know. Most factory cars come with steering angle sensors already in them, especially the newer style cars. It is actually this little deal right here. This is actually a clock spring for the steering angle sensor. So this actually mounts behind the steering wheel, and what happens is there's like a little gyro that goes on here, and it clicks, and it'll tell the steering wheel where it's at as far as revelation goes for steering angle. We're gonna need this because using the stock power steering setup, it's going to want to add more power when you're turning the steering wheel, and the way to input that is when the RPMs raise up, it'll have an input signal that goes from one of these smaller wires, and that small wire will basically relay the signal to the Haltech, and the Haltech will go, okay, cool, we got more signal, or we need more signal, and we'll go ahead and input that signal into the ECU, and then from there it'll actually respond the way it should. What I want to go ahead and do is, now that I kind of got this mocked up, I'll go ahead and mock up the
suspension again, how I kind of want to make it. And this is the whole reason in doing this with the plate in the car is because when I did it without the plate in the car, I kind of had this big old, like, big empty space where I couldn't figure out what I wanted to do with that space. Now that I have this kind of mocked up in the car how I kind of want it to, kind of how I want it. So let me go ahead and go right here. So you get to kind of see a better idea of how I want to do it all. See, a lot of that space gets used up pretty quickly. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to end up probably unbolting this and then unbolting this and then probably just putting this little short guy on there for now. And what I'll be able to do is, I remember if you guys watched one of my previous videos, my buddy Calvin can make these lines for me. So if I take this off, take it down to him, he can make me another line that'll actually be sufficient for what I'm trying to use it for. So that's that. And as you can see, this would have been the pump, but now I'm not using that one. I'm going to be using that one that's over there. So that means I actually can take this one because the wagon outside has a Haltech in it also. I actually can go ahead and make some provisions for doing electronic power steering on that, which that's awesome because that'll be in another video. I like the electronic power steering because you can actually control the power steering when the engine is off, and you can actually move the car around, and it's a lot easier to move the car around. So I think this is turning out really, really good how it's all coming together. I think what I want to do is make next what I want to do is make some provisions for whatever else I want to put on that plate, and then also figure out a way to make this plate like a little stiffer. I don't know if I want to take some 1x1 square tube and basically make a H-brace that's under the whole plate, and that would sit under the whole thing, and that would make it pretty strong, but I'm not trying to add a bunch of weight to it, so I don't know yet. I'm going to come up with an idea and we'll figure it out. So moving forward, next step is going to be, now that we know the clearance that we have, we should be able to make a plate that will take up the rest of the space for right here. Now what I want to do is, I don't really want to put these on this bar. I'd like to like offset them and have them a little bit lower, but with them being lower, it won't actually be effective at normal ride height. With these right now, if I take the jack and I jack up the rear end, you guys will get to see that if I jack up this side, because it's not at full droop, it will actually start and it'll lock in that coilover. So let's go ahead and jack this side up. So let's go ahead and jack that up. You guys can see that. Now, I know it's probably not the best thing to jack up on your axles, but this is just for testing. So we're going to go ahead and make that flat. Looks like the coilover fell. That's exactly what I expected. Okay, so because the shock actually came up, what I'll end up having to do is probably make some type of like something so this doesn't rub against this as bad. For now, it will work. It's probably going to create like a squeaking sound or something, but the idea is that when I get it all straightened out, it won't rub or hit anymore, because I'll be able to notch it out, and then it'll have enough play to where it needs to move back and forth to where I don't have to worry about that hitting. So if I have to, I'll take these back out and then hit that with a grinder to notch out that section so it has room to move back and forth. The coilover fell, as you can see, but it's okay, because if you take the coilover and you sit it right there, that actually is starting to put compression, and it went from a higher setup to where it's actually almost locked in almost, and from there you would have your compression point to where basically it just goes down and it pushes on there. Now with sitting these on here, I did kind of see another bracket that I could make. I could make an outside bracket because these bolts are a little bit longer. So I could make a bracket that would basically take the old shape of this coilover, and then basically it would just sit on here like that, and then I would be able to weld that bracket to here and then make bracing to where those two brackets would be able to brace to each other, and then that should be pretty strong, and then I could make some outside bracing on that also. I really am considering taking out this point of contact that I put on here for the point of contact in the middle. I'm really thinking about taking that out. Oh, it's actually a little loose. I'll have to tighten that up. Thinking about taking this point of contact out in the middle, and then going ahead and making some bracing that'll go from here to here, and that'll make this really strong also. And then this will still be a unboltable deal. So that's the whole thing, is everything unbolts from the car. So if I need to take it out for paint or for whatever it is that I want to take it out for, everything does come apart. And so that's the crazy cool part about the whole setup. And as you can see, I mounted my water pump over there because the idea that I want to do is, I think I'm gonna make a overflow container that might actually sit on this plate, and that overflow container will hold the coolant here. I was gonna put it over the top of the rear end, but I don't want anything dripping down. So what I'm gonna end up doing is making my own custom hose setup that'll go from right there, and it'll go across, and it'll go to the water puppy. And then basically the water puppy is an electronic water pump. It'll pump the fluid up to the inside of the car. So what I'm probably going to end up doing is making a tunnel, or using the stock center console and drilling that little square piece that comes in the rear of the center console. If you guys have a Protege, there's a square that goes in the rear of the center console. I could probably take that square and just take that square out, and then be able to run anything that I need to run up down the center console all the way to the front. So for instance, like my power steering line that you see right there is actually sitting right there now. So that power steering line is actually going to come back, and it's going to have another line that's attached to it that'll go all the way to the back, and this will actually go to the power steering. Yes, that's a little bit longer than normal, but I do want to make sure that the power steering is not in the way of nothing, and I don't want to add it to the engine bay because I'm trying to keep the engine bay literally as naked as possible. And the only thing that I want to put in the engine bay is literally the engine and the transmission, and anything else I kind of want to put it either inside the car or in the trunk of the car, or somehow find a way to try to hide it. I don't want it all exposed. Touching back on to the lateral G sensor again. So now that I have the carpet in there, you guys can kind of see a better idea of what I want to do as far as mounting the G sensor. If you can see right. Alright, we got the panel kind of mocked up in the car, how we're going to have it. So essentially, I kind of want to leave the carpet in the car. I really do like the carpet. The carpet's pretty nice. And it kind of keeps that kind of like racing / kind of factory look to it. So it's like business in the front and business in the back of the car, but in the inside it's still kind of a comforty feeling kind of type. So what I like is that the bracing that I... Alright guys, so what we're working on right now is we have our coilover right here, and basically we have 4 studs that are at the top. At the bottom I went ahead and made some flanges, basically that are going to get welded onto the X-bar inside of the car. I'll make some gussets that go in the middle right here to make it super strong. And pretty much next, so what we got is the lower mounting of the coilover. So we got that part situated. Next part is going to be making a bracket that will tie all 4 of these studs in together and have a tab that hangs off so I can weld my input onto that So that's what we're going to go ahead and do. Now what I did is I took my triangle, my speed triangle, and I went ahead and made some quick measurements on my speed triangle of where those marks are going to be at, or where they need to be at. And then I went ahead and cut out some quick shapes right quick. So I'm going to go ahead and use the grinder and the cutoff wheel. Go ahead and get these cut out, then get them all shaped up. And then from there, I'll get back with you guys in just a second. And we will put some holes in here and see how they look on top of the coilovers. So I'll see you in a second.